Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. Today's guest is Writers of the Future winner, Preston Dennett. Welcome, Preston.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
And first of all, congratulations for winning.
Yeah, I'm so happy. I can't even tell you.
So yours is one of the most amazing success stories. So how long have you been entering the contest?
I've entered the contest, I started back in 1986 and entered 12 times all the way up to 1992 and got all rejections, actually, and gave up. It was real tough. I really thought I was going to win and kind of just knew I could do it, but it didn't happen. And I was very discouraged for a long time. But, the years rolled by, and 17 years rolled by, and I still wanted to be a science fiction writer. I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'd better start. So I remembered the contest, and I went and I found the books. I'm like, wow, it's still going on. And I bought them all, and I read every single story. I read every single story in all of anthologies, and started entering again. Got rejected once, twice, 3 times, 4th time. Got my first honorable mention, and I think it was entry 16 or 17. And couldn't stop me from that point. I was ready to go.
That's amazing. So now there's was a few years of non-entry there. So like, what happened? Was there like any type of detour or sidetrack or? Yeah,
actually, I grew up wanting to be a science fiction writer. I knew it since a very young age.
Yeah.
My mom had given me Clifford Simak's book, Macedonia, and that hooked me. But after not being able to do it, I started having success with nonfiction. I wrote a UFO article, of all things, for the local newspaper, and it got the front page. I thought, hey, that's cool.
Yeah. And
I sent an article off to a magazine, and they published it, also got the front page. I got a $100 check, and things kind of just, I'm going to write about real aliens and put this science fiction stuff in the back burner, which I really thought was going to be my destiny, but
right.
You know what? You have to follow the path you're given.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did and became really successful, in that particular genre.
Good. So, so you said you've been writing since 1986, submitting?
Yeah, I saw the first book in the bookstore, The Writers of the Future book, and Is
that how you found out about it?
That is, yeah. And I picked it up. I'm like, wow, this is a really cool contest. It's anonymous, open only to amateurs, and that's why I was super excited about it.
Right.
And I found about it. I entered 47 times, actually, before I finally got that call that one of my stories was a finalist.
So tell me about that call. How did that go down?
Oh, it was amazing. I really couldn't believe it. I was at work, actually, and a phone call came through, and I'm like, hey, hello, it's Preston. I'm expecting it to be a business call, and it was Joni. And she's like, are you sitting down? I'm like, yes, I am, and I'm like, please be easy on me, Joni, because I'm kind of expecting a rejection. And she's like, no, you won. You actually won 2nd place. And I screamed out loud. My boss comes running in. He's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I'm going to need a week off next year because I just won this huge contest. And it was the best day ever, really.
That's great. So, I guess, tell me about your story.
Yeah, my story is actually pretty short. It's not terribly long. I've entered a lot longer stories into the contest.
Yeah.
And had flat-out rejections. And, did eventually earn 12 honorable mentions before I finally got this one that took 2nd place. It's a short science fiction story, which I would describe as a post-apocalyptic romance with time bubbles. It sort of takes place in a world that's worn out a little bit. There's a lot of aggressions. There's been a nuclear holocaust when suddenly these time bubbles appear. And they start trapping little bits of the world sort of frozen in place. And this gentleman, the main character, Walter, his wife is inside one of the time bubbles. So that's kind of the whole setting. I can't give away too much because it's not a terribly long story. And but I'm delighted to see how well it's done and the reaction I'm getting. And
that's an awesome story.
Yeah.
It's a definitely a good story. How did you think of that idea? I mean, that's you talk like time bubbles, like it's something I should know about. Yeah, they're in time bubbles. Like, so how'd you come up with this?
Right. Well, I'm a huge science fiction fan, and time travel, time variations is a huge theme in science fiction.
Uh-huh.
And it's kind of a subject I think every science fiction writer wants to tackle at some point. So I sat there and I meditated on it. And I don't know where ideas come from, really. They just kind of drop into your head. And when this one dropped in, I knew it was a winner. I mean, I knew this was a good idea. If I could just find a way to, wrap the words around it, find the right character, get the right setting. I tried 3 or 4 times before I felt comfortable with, the setting and the character and all the elements that go into writing a story. But I knew I had a good idea.
Yeah.
If I could just make it work.
It was an awesome idea. Totally fresh, which is one of the key ingredients of success for writers of the future is fresh ideas.
Yeah, and I knew that, from reading all the books. I love the stories in the volumes. They're, I think, among the most unique out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that's just really quirky about them, really, like you say, fresh, different. They're just good. I don't know how else to describe them. They're all really good, whether it's, I like fantasy and science fiction. I like all tropes, so I'm kind of easy to please in some ways.
Yeah.
But those books, man, there's not a dud among them.
So in terms of, for an aspiring writer, what's the advantage of reading the stories in the books?
Oh, there's a lot of advantages. I mean, besides the essays from the writer-judges, which is huge, and you get to read the author bios, I love that, but the stories themselves show you what's kind of fresh in science fiction, what's current, and what people are looking for, what sort of makes the judges resonate. And I learned more really from those anthology books and from the Writers of the Future forum than, all of school and college.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not being facetious about that. That is utterly true. That Writers of the Future forum was a gold mine for me, and I got all the knowledge and inspiration I needed. I was near to giving up again.
Really?
when I was browsing the Writers of the Future forum and came upon this thread about not giving up, because I couldn't get past the honorable mention barrier. I'm like, I want a semifinalist.
Yeah.
I want a silver. Come on, I want to be a finalist. What am I doing wrong? And came upon this thread about not giving up, because I knew you kind of can tell when you're beginning to, you're starting to sell some stories, perhaps, to semi-pro magazines and things like that. So I knew I was progressing. And I found this thread that said, don't give up. And I'm like, oh, this ought to be inspiring. And one guy on the thread said, don't worry, I'll never give up. I've heard the story of Topanga Canyon. Got a cold chill at that point, because I grew up in Topanga Canyon. That's where I lived when I was, in 1980s, 1990s, when I was sending into the contest. And I'm like, all right, who's this Topanga Canyon? What's the story? Tell me. Turns out the Topanga Canyon story is a cautionary tale about a writer who gave up. The editors were talking about him, magazine editors, people that were looking for him at conventions, book editors were talking about him. Everyone was wondering who was going to publish his first story. I'm like, oh, God. That's me. I just know that's me. It was a workshop taught by Dean Wesley Smith. And I'm like, okay, I know who he is. He's in one of the books, the first volume.
Mm-hmm.
His story, a great story. I'm going to contact him, see if this is for real. And sure enough, it was. He was very gracious, totally astounded. And he's like, yeah, that's you. Mind you, I hadn't won yet.
Right.
And here I am finding out I have this secret identity almost, like I'm a superhero and didn't even know it. And it was great news. I mean, I was so happy to think that, gosh, my stories were good. And I didn't even know it. But I was also devastated, because I'm like, God, I was there. I was there at the end of the road, and I gave up. So that really gave me the inspiration I needed to keep going. And boy, when I won, first thing I did was I contacted Dean Wesley Smith, and I'm like, I've got an ending for your cautionary tale here about Topanga Canyon. I won second place. So knocked his socks flat off.
That's great. That's really, really good. That's an amazing story. So, any particular major influencers in your life as a writer?
Oh yeah, my top influence for sure would be Clifford Simak. He was the first guy. I'm 14 years old. I read all his books, and that was followed, of course, by Heinlein and Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, the big three. Robert Silverberg, Roger Zelazny. I loved them all, really. I lived and breathed science fiction for years, and still do.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely, I'm kind of really into that classic adventure sci-fi, that, like Heinlein, and I like Simak's stuff. His is the best.
That's great. So, what can we look forward to in the world of science fiction? What can we look forward to from you in the future?
Well, I've sold a bunch of stories already to a wide variety of semi-pro, a couple of pro magazines, and I'm not going to give up on that. I love short story writing. Just sold another one, so I'm happy about that, to a pro-level magazine, and I got others sent out. But I'm really wanting to transition to novels, because that's really what my dream has always been, and I've got a couple started. I really want to do it right the first time.
Yeah.
So I'm a little nervous about it because I haven't written any novels. And so really that's where I want to concentrate my energies on transitioning to novels while still sort of doing the short story craft, which I love.
Good. Now this coming week, what are you most looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to all of it. I really honestly am. I love meeting the other writers. I'm super excited about that. Giving my speech, seeing my trophy, all of that stuff. But mostly seeing my story in that book. I think, doing the autograph signing and holding that, and just knowing I'm like, oh my God, I finally did it, and this is real. And it won't be real until I have that book in my hands, right, and can see my illustration. Mm-hmm. I'm really looking forward to that. I dreamt about it, actually.
It's an amazing illustration. So what piece of advice would you have to offer to the aspiring writer?
Don't give up, obviously. I mean, that's key. No matter how many rejections you get, no matter what anyone tells you. I had a pro-level magazine back in the 80s tell me, stop sending. You're not improving. It hurt. I was getting some great advice from some of the major editors. Stanley Schmidt gave me a personal rejection. Fantasy and Science Fiction. Dean Wesley Smith was very helpful. He's like, you're almost there. So don't give up is my first advice. Learn your craft, of course. Find a writers group or a forum. The Writers of the Future Forum worked for me. I would definitely recommend that. And those books have everything you need to be a short story writer in science fiction, certainly. And probably novels. I think they would work for that, too. Because there's just so much advice from so many different judges. And, I found them really invaluable.
That's great. Well, I very much look forward to following your career as it continues to expand now. And have a great week.
Hey, thanks very much.
Thanks, Preston. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for our next installment of the Writers of the Future podcast. Subscribe to the Writers of the Future podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Writers and Illustrators of the Future are contests created by L. Ron Hubbard to provide a means for the aspiring writer and artist to be seen and acknowledged. It is free to enter and open to new and amateur short story writers and artists of science fiction or fantasy.